So welcome back to another Impact Sessions podcast with me, Nick Bramley. This week, I'm delighted to explore from Lightbulb, quite literally, to finished product, the journey of an innovator. I've got a great guest on this week. It's Michael Crinnion, inventor of Luma³. He's also a founder of Mind Body Goals, a mental health and wellbeing advocate, and a pastoral care and educational specialist. So you must have quite a business card with all that on the back of it. So without further ado, Michael, we're going to explore Luma³. Welcome to the Impact Sessions podcast.
Thanks for having me, Nick. Excited to be here.
No worries, good to see you. The reason you're on, I think, amongst other things, is apart from the exciting innovation journey, is that you and I work with a mutual contact, Richard Hall at PDM International in Thirsk. He's got an innovation design studio. And he was telling me all about kind of what you're up to and your backstory and this fantastic new product. And I thought to myself, yeah, we need to have that explored, and we need to have Michael on. So let's start the exploration, really. Before we get on to Luma³, which is the bulk of today, give us a bit of potted history about Michael Crinnion. Talk us through your sort of career path and a few highlights to date.
So it's interesting what you say there about the large business card, because I have dotted around probably more than most people do, but I think most of what I've done has all led me to this point. So I started out, I've got a big passion for design and problem solving in general, actually. Mm-hmm. So that was what I sort of pursued out of the gate, if you like, with school and college. So I did a product design degree on the engineering route at the University of Huddersfield. And then out of university, I went to work at a company in Leeds, which was actually where Richard and I met.
Right.
Worked there for about just over a year, and then both Richard and I started businesses separately but working together. Mm-hmm. So did that for about 5 years to reasonable success. I was young, I was in my 20s, so I was doing lots of things. Yeah. I was DJing at the time, and I was doing the design work, and so I was having a good time, but I didn't find it massively gratifying. Like, it wasn't sort of soul quenching, if you like.
Yeah.
It was right for me at the time, but it wasn't making a big impact on me, and I didn't see a huge future in it. And at the time, a friend of mine was going to apply for teaching, and I'd always had in the back of my head, both my parents are teachers, so I'd sort of always had in the back of my mind that teaching might be something that I would want to do. And so I just did. I just sort of did what I have a tendency to do sometimes, which is just flip a switch.
I guess that's in your DNA then, if it's from both your parents. Were you, what level, secondary or primary, or what level of teaching was it?
Yeah, secondary, so 11 to 16.
Hats off to you for that, I'd have to say, to be honest. Yeah, so how long did you get it? What were you doing in teaching? What were you teaching then? I presume design stuff?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so design and technology. But actually, my first job after my training was at an excellent school, Ryburn, in Halifax, and I actually got a job doing the construction course there. And I stayed there for 8 years and taught a mixture of design, technology, and construction. But it was teaching that where I really sort of felt like I'd found my my home, if
right.
You like. I just took to it really naturally and genuinely enjoyed it, and found that particularly the pastoral side. So everyone's a form tutor when they start in teaching, and it was the bit that I immediately thought, this is brilliant. I love this. Like, these are my kids, and I get to know these kids. I see them every day.
Yeah.
And so that was the path I took through education. I went I was an assistant head of year, and then I was a head of year, which would probably be one of my career highlights, to be honest, being a head of year for just under 6 years. Well, a little over, actually, I think. I absolutely loved that. I love the impact that you can have with students, but also just with families. You support parents, you build up good relationships. I genuinely loved that job, but I still felt like there was more I could do, and I had ideas. So I moved schools from there, into a senior leadership position, which I did for around 18 months. And still had this desire, had this sort of unsated feeling that there was something else that I could be doing. And I've always been into design, always tinkering, I'm always doing bits and bobs. And this, I've had, an idea rattling around in my head for a while, and I just sort of took the opportunity really, and that's where we're at now.
Okay, well, let's explore that leap of faith then. You're no longer teaching then, you're full-time on sort of the Luma³ journey and some of the other stuff that you're doing sort of with the mind body goals stuff.
That's right.
So what exactly is Luma³ then, and where did the idea, talk us through it? Have you got one there? I know most people consume this podcast on audio, but I will also put some pictures in the show notes, as it were. Have you got a Luma³ there? Tell us a bit about what Luma³ is and where the idea came from.
So this is Luma³. I mean, primarily the idea comes from my genuine belief in conscious breathing, which is its main function, as a quite simple, well, and very effective tool to use in lots of situations, particularly stressful or anxious situations. So its main function is to help people who might not normally access something like conscious breathing to do so. So it does that by use of light. So there's no buzzers or timers or sound. It just swells up from the inside with light, and you breathe with that as you you breathe with the light as it swells up. And then it'll, depending on the cycle that you've chosen, it'll then fade back down to guide your out breath and time how long you need to hold either inhalations or exhalations. It keeps a track for you.
So given the work you were doing in school and you were doing pastoral care with teenagers and things, was this as a result of, being in some, I would imagine, some fairly stressful situations, both for you and for the teenagers themselves? School's not easy for everyone. Is that kind of where the, pardon the pun, the light bulb came on for Luma?
Well, yeah. I mean, I was taught conscious breathing back in my 20s. I've had my run-ins with anxiety and mental health, which is part of where the passion for it comes from. And it's just always been a tool that I've used myself. And so I'm a sharer, probably an oversharer sometimes. And so if I've got something that I think is useful, I just naturally want to share it with people. And so, yes, I would use it in school, and partly for myself, like you say, to deal with stress. It is a stressful job. But with students as well. And I mean, we mentioned Richard earlier, but when I first was telling him about Luma, I said that one of the barriers to conscious breathing with students is that you have to be there with them in order to sort of guide them through it. And it's weird. It's weird. They don't like it. You sort of, especially when I was a head of year and then a senior leader, and you sort of kind of taking them to your office and going, right, you're now in the head of year's office or in the vice principal's office, and I want you to relax. I just felt like
that in itself, that environment's going to cause the stress to go up, I would imagine.
Exactly. So it's like, I think it comes from a genuine desire to share something that I just think is so powerful and so easy to learn. But seeing this issue of, it is, for a lot of people, and I include myself in this, a little bit anxiety inducing to be doing it in front of somebody else. So this is a way that you can do that sort of quietly and away from others. So then I suppose its second sort of function is the timing. So not only does it teach the conscious breathing, but it then sits with you whilst you work and will periodically light up. Again, like I mentioned before, it's not going to nag at you. It doesn't beep. It doesn't buzz or keep going or get more urgent. It just gently lights up for a few seconds to say, that's 55 minutes now. You should take a break. And then you do conscious breathing. So you're sort of layering up this immediate effect of using the cube for conscious breathing, but you're also getting the benefits of the habit forming side of things. So you're doing this often and you're practicing these calm feelings.
So it's a sort of passive supporter for wellness, isn't it? And well-being, and that's a massive subject which you're going to explore shortly. Just hold it up again for those who are watching on video, because I've been up close and personal with Luma³, and I have to say it does in its own right feel like a really nice piece of sort of what I call desk furniture.
Yeah.
So it feels like it's got a high quality sort of Swedish design to it. It's got good quality materials. Was that a deliberate choice when you were designing the product? Because essentially it's something that lights up and reminds you to breathe consciously. It could have looked like anything, but it looks like a really nice piece of desk furniture. Was that deliberate?
Absolutely. I would say it was paramount really to the design. I think there's an understated calmness and comfort that comes with quality. I think part of the reason people enjoy expensive, I mean, I'm falling back on things I used to use at school when I was teaching design, but there's aesthetics isn't just how something looks, it's how it feels, how it sounds when you put it down on a table, the weight of the object, you know, the textures, how warm it is, contrasts in temperature, so many things.
Yeah.
And so in order to get that feel and that sense of satisfaction when you're holding it, I knew that it had to be heavy enough that it felt reassuring to hold. But yeah, there's something that, I mean, I'm sure my wife would say she thinks I'm a bit obsessed with wood. You can actually see in the background here, there's this giant wall of it in the bedroom. So wood is just a material that for me, and I think a lot of others, just feels better.
Yeah, I mean, and it's got a solidity, but it's also got a calmness about it, hasn't it? In terms of, you know, like you say, when you touch, feel, and hold it. But you can imagine that sat next to your PC when you're working from home, and it just gently sort of illuminates and just reminds you to take a little bit of time for yourself. And it's not going to, like you say, it's not going to buzz or frighten you or jump at you or, you know, make any noises. It just feels, you know, a really good quality sort of piece of desk furniture. So you'll know as much as anybody else, but product development can be and probably is notoriously challenging. And even with your own experience and even working with people like Richard at PDM, you know, there's still pitfalls and potholes and stuff. So what have been the challenges, hurdles, or bumps in the road so far to where you've got the product as it stands today?
So ironically, probably the wooden base.
Right.
I've had questions the whole way. Why are you making the base out of wood? Because it is harder to make. It is far harder to make with a wooden base, and with a shaped wooden base that fits the form of the product.
Yeah.
It's not just, this isn't just like a rectangle of wood that it's sat on. You know, it's part of the housing, and it's got, you know, rounded off corners. So the wooden base has been a challenge, but one that I and Richard at PDM firmly believe is a challenge that's worth taking on, because it's, as I've already said, it's just a really important part of the aesthetic and the feel of the product. But yeah, that's been difficult. I mean, anytime you're working with wood in small tolerances, you're setting yourself up for some work. And then I would probably say the other part that's been a challenge, but I mean a good challenge, and was one of the early things that I tackled, is the actual light diffusion. So I think part of what makes the product have that sort of kind of ooh factor when people first hold it is you can't identify the light inside Luma. So I've seen cheap mood lights, or even not cheap mood lights actually, where you'll look at them and you can quite easily visually identify where the LED is, or where the 3 LEDs are. That's not the case with Luma, and that's down to a sort of a double diffuser design that I spent some time on, and that's been a lot of the work that I've personally done, and work that I've done with PDM, is getting this really even light. So that's been challenging, but in an enjoyable kind of design iteration way.
Well, I can imagine you and Richard, because I know Richard really well, sort of chewing the fat, burning the midnight oil, working out, you know, I know both of you are probably going to say we can make it happen, and that's a really good attitude to have. But
Yeah.
that's where innovation comes in. That's where entrepreneurship comes in, and you know, we're damned if we're not going to make this happen. How long has it taken from, you know, having these ideas when you were teaching secondary students through to where you are now with that cube in your hand?
So there would be a soft start, I imagine, whilst I probably first started thinking about the idea of a device for teaching conscious breathing when we were in lockdown the first time. So I was still in education then, and part of my role was wellbeing for staff and students. And so I was sort of racking my brain on, well, how do we do that remotely? Like what can we do or give or show people that could help them? And I saw quite a few sort of videos and there's apps and bits and bobs that you can do for conscious breathing, but the problem there is that they're all just more screens. And I was really trying to think of a way to get people away from screens, and we did lots of wonderful things, but
well, the thing with screens is they can add to the stress levels, can't they? Because people,
exactly.
you know, so they're actually they're not particularly an app for wellness and well-being doesn't really help if you're using the tool and device that's probably creating some of that stress in the first place, I guess.
Exactly. I have an app on my phone that I use regularly and that I enjoy. But the feature on it that I don't enjoy is the tracking. I don't enjoy being told that I've missed a meditation session.
Yeah.
Like, hang on, sorry, meditation overlord. But I'll meditate when I want to and when I feel I need to, not when you're dinging me and then track. I don't like that.
Yeah.
And that's a deliberate decision with Luma. But yeah, so it came about through this idea of how can you help people without directing them to a screen. Because as you say,
I'm going to ask you about teenagers. Teenagers have seen this, and teenagers have, you know, used it in prototype form or whatever. What's the reaction been? Because I'm thinking initially quite cynical. It's just a cube, sir. What's that going to do for me, sir? That kind of stuff. But you know, what's the reaction been from your teenage cohort who've been involved in maybe, you know, some of the prototyping?
Posh, innit?
What a great answer. Posh, innit? Okay, that's good. All right. And then when they've used it or seen it in action?
Yeah, and we're planning some more of that between now and the launch. But yeah, I mean, so far the reception from everybody, but yeah, including teenagers, has been really positive, because from the outset, for me, it was all about simplicity. You know, about it having 1, 2, 3 functions that it does really, really well and that are very easy to access.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, the response has been good. I think the first response is usually that it's a nice thing.
Yeah.
And that people always
by the way, Mike, that's not a bad first reaction, is it?
No, it isn't. No, not at all. And I actually think that gets you. I think maybe rightly or wrongly, people like nice things, and you know, you've got it, being given a nice thing helps you to start feeling better straight away, doesn't it?
Well, car manufacturers and car designers spend a fortune, you know, looking at the aesthetics of the inside of the cabin, don't they? And I know a number of years ago, we talked about Swedish, you know, Volvo launched this thing where they've got like a bit of a floating center console, and as a piece of design, it looks fabulous, and it's very tactile, and it moved up the element of kind of prestigeness about their brand, as it were. So I'm just interested in the science behind this. You know, you talk about conscious breathing. Is that the science behind Luma³ then, you know, all about conscious breathing and what that's about then?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't invent conscious breathing, so I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, really. We're going back literally thousands of years that people have been doing this in its various forms. It crops up in religions, and it crops up in all sorts of other like cultural practices. But what it's now garnering, you know, in an increasing speed, is a lot of scientific evidence as well. So I mean, a lot of people will know this, but our bodies have, this is a gross oversimplification, but our bodies kind of, in terms of stress, have sort of two modes effectively, and two sort of systems for that. So we've got our sympathetic nervous system and our parasympathetic nervous system, and our sympathetic nervous system is there to get us going. So that's our fight or flight, like our stress response. It releases the hormones and it affects our organs, it affects our heart rate, all those things. And that's our let's go, let's run away from that lion that's about to get us response. And then we have the opposite to that, which is the parasympathetic nervous system, which does the opposite of that. So it says there's no danger here, we're safe, we can rest, we can digest. And that again, it affects your organs, it affects your heart rate, and it affects your thinking, it affects your brain. You don't need good cognitive abilities necessarily if you're about to be attacked by a lion. You just need to get out of there. So
you probably need a good pair of trainers, and you need to have been to the gym. You need to be in the gym quite recently, don't you? I think.
Yeah, exactly. So, and our bodies, we've got these mechanisms, or have these mechanisms, sort of from the past, really, if you like. They're still useful now, but they, in a lot of people, aren't always helpful. And I'm not actually sure that our lives are like that now. Our lives aren't, there's a lion and I need to run for my life and now I'm safe. I think we spend most of our time in a kind of gray area of sort of partially stressed and partially in danger and partially okay. And is it the evening? So is that safe? Can I relax? And so what conscious breathing does is it kind of, for what maybe want of a better word, it forces our body back into the parasympathetic nervous system, if you like. So, because for a long time we were under the belief that these were completely automatic processes and that there was no way we could do anything to affect them. And you get stressed and your breathing becomes shallow and it stays at the top of your lungs, and your heart rate variability changes, and that's just what happens. And it is what happens. But if we force our breathing specifically into the patterns that it would have whilst we were relaxed, then that moves our body, kind of coaxes our body into this parasympathetic nervous system. So it's proven. And actually what Luma is doing is just helping people to access that.
Well, I would say that wellness, well-being, mental health, all those things are massive agenda items, have been accelerated as a result of the lockdown, because the stresses and pressures of, being on furlough, working from home, uncertainty and all those kind of things. So I think it's one of those things where you look at it and you go, timing might be absolutely right in your favor. But you mentioned a launch. So let's talk about that. You're currently planning a Kickstarter funding launch. I know that's imminent. You haven't got a specific date on that, but we've got an idea when that might be. What are the details of this, and how can someone get involved if they're inspired by Luma³ and what you're doing in that space then, Michael?
So, for most people, I think, certainly that will be listening to the podcast, they'll be familiar with Kickstarter and how that works. But sort of in brief, it's a crowdfunding system, and we're going to be launching the product on that at the end of this month, at the end of April, or in the first week of May. And like you say, exact date pending. If people want that exact date, which they should, then they can go to the website, which I think you're going to put up with the podcast. But
I am.
Yeah. And that we'll be sending out emails to give specific dates. But essentially that's going to be up on Kickstarter, and people can go on there and they can pledge to support this project. We will have various different pledge rewards so that people can go on and just think, I want one of those, and I'm going to back this project, and I want to make sure that this ends up as a business and that this ends up as a product out in the market. And we'll have some larger rewards there for companies as well, to give to gifts, as it's good to employees as gifts. But obviously, if anybody listening to the podcast also just wants to contact me directly, then of course they can, or through LinkedIn. Again, I think you're putting that information
I'm
on.
going to put all your contact details at the end: website, LinkedIn, email, phone number, inside leg measurement, all the whole works there, Michael. So there's no excuse for somebody who's not inspired not to be able to get in touch with you. We're going to touch on some routes to market shortly, but what's the long term? Obviously, you've got to get it up and running. You've got the product there. There's a bit of investment requirement to take it to the next stage, and that's what the Kickstarter is about. And hopefully that'll be very successful, because it is a fabulous product, well designed, lovely piece of desk furniture, but with a really good scientific, robust kind of research behind it, which is going to do some wonderful things. What's the long-term aim for Luma³? Where do you see it being if you get, and I say if, but the first hurdle is always the biggest one, isn't it? Get past that and suddenly you got a momentum. What's the long-term aim for it?
I mean, I once had a boss say to me that I sometimes spend too much time looking at the bigger picture.
Right.
But for me, the bigger picture is that well-being and wellness in work, or at home or at school, needs a kind of culture shift. It needs a big paradigm shift at all levels, right through leadership, all the way through the company, the school, whatever it might be. So I think I would like it to be kind of part of the momentum that is picking up at the moment, which is to drive this idea that well-being is a culture, is an all the time thing. It's not on a Wednesday.
Yeah, it's always on, isn't it? Well-being and wellness are always on. It's not, like you say, it's not, we'll have a wellness Wednesday, but we don't care what happens to you between Thursday and the following Tuesday.
I mean, I often try and link, or try and use as an analogy, I suppose, to a certain degree, this, which I believe is wrong to do this, but we do, is, you've got mental health and you've got physical health.
Yeah.
And everyone's very familiar with physical health and the things that you do to maintain your physical health. And mental health is just the same way. It's that word, it's maintain. So, it would be farcical to say that as a company, we've got a physical health strategy, which is on a Wednesday, everyone's going to eat just lettuce, and everyone's going to go for a run after work.
Right.
And then Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, just go for your life, do whatever you want, eat all the time. Don't do any exercise, because don't worry, Wednesday we're eating lettuce. It doesn't make sense, and it doesn't work. It's a lot about lifestyle and culture.
Okay. Well, you've also mentioned off air this something called the giving back approach to Luma³. So very briefly, I'm just conscious of time. We've got a few things I'd still like to explore. Do you want to share with us what that giving back on Luma³ entails then, and where that came from?
Yeah, I mean, from its inception, because I was still working in education when I came up with the idea, I knew I knew in my heart that I wasn't willing or ready to move back to product design without continuing my link and passion in education. So the business that I'm setting up behind Luma³, the intention from the outset is that for every 10 of these that we sell, one of them is going to be made available for schools or colleges, universities, for free.
Right.
And that'll be provided with a set of resources and other educational information on the science behind conscious breathing, how to do it, why you should use it. And then with the, you plan for success, don't you? So once the product gets a hold in the market, then the profits from the business will be to develop additional products, but also to then directly fund mental health support and interventions in high schools. There's no shortage of people in high schools that want to help kids.
Yeah.
But there is a shortage of time, and there is a shortage of money. So that's the give back element, but it is, for me, it's fundamental personally to me that the product and that anything that I do has a big impact, really. I want to feel proud of what the product does and what the company that I set up does, and so therefore that is fundamental to the company mission.
Fantastic. That might get a few people involved in Kickstarter who understand the education system and some of the challenges around that as well. So that's good to see. We briefly touched on, routes to market very briefly. Where do you think you're going to get the routes to market for this? Because obviously you can look at it as a consumable product, an individual purchases on a website, for example, but there's bigger corporates and stuff. What's your thoughts on your plan for that at this stage?
So I think there's probably three models. Well, there is three models at the moment. The first is as you say, like a consumer product, so direct to customers. So in the first instance, that would be Kickstarter, which I know they wouldn't. It's not pre-sales, but it's of that ilk. And everybody gets one once the project's successful.
Yeah.
And then direct sales through my website and other online retailers.
Yeah.
But then, as you say, so there's a kind of corporate, the coined term that I've been using is a sort of corporate wellness responsibility market, and there's businesses popping up left, right, and centre in order to try and meet that need, and lots of great businesses. There's less products, by which I mean physical products. There are some, but far fewer. So I could see this being a good gift for a company to give its employees, to show that they actually mean it when they say we want you to feel better.
Yeah.
That we want to give you something here that's going to make a difference. And I think that is more convincing with Luma than it would be with perhaps an online product, because it's not online. It can't phone home. It doesn't log anything. And I think there's always a little bit of inherent skepticism, often misplaced, but understandable, I think, around some of the wellness platforms.
But I also think if you receive that as a gift from your corporate sort of HR or wellness team or whatever, even in isolation, it's a nice piece of kit. Like you say, it's nice in it, posh in it, it's a nice thing to receive, and educating people on their conscious breathing, just an additional bonus at that stage. It's not something you go, what the hell's this? It's a really nice piece of kit, isn't it? So
yeah, exactly.
I'm just thinking, we're at nearly 50 episodes of the Impact Sessions podcast, and I've had at least a couple of people on here. I'm thinking Ella Mesmer, who's from Business Yoga, Lorna Feeney. She's a brilliant mental health advisor and trainer for like one of the world's largest insurance companies. And even Steve Joyce, recent guest, who's the managing director of SES Engineering Services. They're all invested heavily, personally and corporately, in the whole wellness, wellbeing, mental health agenda. So imagining them as potential customers. Ella does, business yoga, and she does online classes, and she's fabulous at doing all that. And Lorna works for big organizations. Steve's the MD of a big multi-million-pound organization. Imagine them as potential customers or advocates for Luma³. What would you say to them about why they should get in touch with you then?
I mean, I'm passionate. I'm passionate about what I'm doing here. And one of the things that's been most enjoyable about this short but intense journey is meeting other people that are passionate in the same area, and people that like to get things done the way I do. And so, I mean, that if you want to, if anyone that wants to get in touch and wants to be involved, I mean, one of the brilliant things is part of it, touching back on the science. I've been in touch with a variety of people in this sphere to get some, if you like, endorsement from that point of view. So I spoke to Dr. Kat Daly. She wrote a book called Sleep Sense, and she gave me ideas on how the product would be beneficial that I hadn't even realized or thought of with regard to sleep. And so I just think there's so many, that it's a product that can wear many hats. It has a very clear primary function, but actually, like you say, even just getting something nice from your boss, from your company, is already giving a well-being boost. And I just think a lot of these people that know these markets inside out will probably have ideas that I don't even necessarily have for you.
Well, I'll directly tag Steve, Ella, and Lorna into the post that when we release this podcast. And I know that there'll be some level of interest. I don't know what that level of interest will be, but they are ideal for at least assessing and maybe just giving you some feedback on how they would see it and how they would use it, really. So I've got a final question for you. You sort of launched the thought process and the idea in the jaws of a pandemic, which was great timing. 2021 looks a little bit less stressful from we're opening up a little bit, and we hope that we've got it under control with vaccines, etc. What does 2021 look like, the rest of it for Luma³, and where do you hope to be by the end of the year?
Well, a successful Kickstarter campaign, obviously. So, the hope would be that funds the setup, the manufacturing and the stocking of the product. And also, I think, like, for example, with this podcast, that builds knowledge and exposure to the product. And then I would like those units to be getting out to the backers as quickly as possible. Kickstarter has a not necessarily deserved reputation, but for some people's projects don't always get out as quickly. And I would like, we're ready pretty much to have these going out.
Yeah.
So I'd like those to be out to the backers, and I'd like them to be out to the schools, importantly. And then getting it on sale online.
Okay.
So the product's available just in retail. And then I would also like to be able to find some companies to work with that are bought into the idea, and that they would be giving those out. And then I think that there's going to be a period there where, like I've just said, people find uses for these. You give someone something simple and they find 10 ways to use it, and I've already had people suggest, well, I'm gonna buy one, and then I'm gonna buy 10, and I'm going to give them to all my yoga class, because we're doing yoga on Zoom at the moment, and then we'll all have something that we can all keep in sync. And so, and I'm like, that's brilliant, I hadn't thought of that. So I'm just excited to get it out there and start working with people and companies and getting it. The more we sell, the more we get into the hands of students in schools, you see. So that really, getting it out there, getting it successful, and then using that to double down on the sentiment behind the product, which is ultimately to get a really easily accessible tool for boosting your wellness into as many people's hands as possible.
Well, that's been a brilliant insight into how you've gone about delivering your idea and concept out into a product that you're now going to take, not necessarily mass market initially, but certainly out to the marketplace, that with some backing, people will see the real benefit. Really explain the science behind things very well as well. So that's hopefully interesting to our audience. And for those who don't know, the Impact Sessions is released every Tuesday. It's released on a LinkedIn post. It's also released on the IMPACTUS group website. And then that's posted out directly every Tuesday morning to iTunes, Spotify, Google Play. We've got a YouTube channel, Podbean, Castbox, the whole lot, really. So there's no excuse to not subscribe and get your automatic fix of the Impact Sessions. This has been an absolutely fantastic session. I've put the contact details up on the end of the audio and the video for Michael, but I'll also put those in the show notes, so there's no excuse not to find him on email, LinkedIn, website, mobile phone, etc. But it just remains for me to say that Michael, this has been an absolutely excellent episode of the Impact Session. It's been really interesting. Thanks for being a guest. I knew you'd be great, and I've really enjoyed it, and hope our audience will as well.
Yeah, thanks very much. I've enjoyed it too, Nick. Thanks for having me.
See you soon. Cheers.
Thanks.